Welcome to CramerSez. CramerSez. Be part of the show at CramerSez.com. Interact on Twitter at CramerSez. Now, CramerSez.
Welcome to the show. My name is Kramer. This is the CramerSez podcast. It is, Monday, January 23rd. It's a very special date. Today marks the 1-year anniversary of the Canadian Trucker Convoy, and today our guest is Big Red, Chris Barber. Let me get into it. I'm going to give you some props here first so we can get into it. You are an owner-operator, correct? You not only own the company, but you also drive for yourself. You're on the road.
I'm on the road right now, yes.
The timeline of the convoy, for those of you who've forgotten, is that the convoy departed from Delta, British Columbia, January 23rd, a year ago today, and arrived in Ottawa on January 30th, and they remained there until February 20th. Now, during that period, the world witnessed, I think you would say it, Chris, the world witnessed a ton of heartwarming images of you guys coming together and Canadians being able to come together with one voice. What we also saw, and what we also witnessed internationally, is a tyrannical government that was afraid of its own people and willing to do anything to push them back and put them back under control. With that being said, Chris Barber, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Kramer. Glad to be here.
You've had a rough year.
No, it's not been a rough year. It's been a different year. A lot of stuff has changed in the last 12 months, I guess. I never thought I'd be in the back of a police car with handcuffs on and criminally charged and facing 2 to 10 years in federal prison for my the things, but here we are 12 months later and things are good. We're busy, we're staying busy, we're playing by the rules.
Well, for those of the audience who don't know your story complete, kind of explain how you got into the situation that you're currently in and how long you contemplated that decision to take off for Ottawa.
Well, I guess it started in October of last year when the province I live in, Saskatchewan, adopted the COVID vaccine mandate, the card, and we had to show that card in order to get into our restaurant or a movie theater or a gym. I felt that one burned my ass. It was bad enough with the amount of regulations we were dealing with before, and then this one was the topper. And the one that finished it for me was the mandate for cross-border truckers on the 15th. We've been good enough for the last 2 years, and all of a sudden now we're garbage, and we have to fall in line. And for anybody that wants to, question me, unvaxxed or vaxxed, I'm vaxxed. I was vaccinated so I could keep my job and feed my family, but afterwards regretted it. And a couple of guys reached out to me and said we need to do something about this. It needs to stop. And there the idea went. Let's go to Ottawa. So 2,500 vehicles later behind me, and we had a convoy.
Well, you made a song from the 1970s real popular again.
Yeah, I don't know
that song. Breaker 19.
Yeah.
So you said you took the vaccine. You stepped through the steps. Did you see this as a continuation of tyranny? And I know that people throw that a term around very loosely today. But when you witnessed what you were going through, did you see any end in sight?
I could have, there's so many options that could have been there. We were there peaceful. We just wanted a conversation with our government, but our government didn't want a conversation with us. So that's how it kind of escalated. Unfortunately, it could have been resolved within the first couple of days, but our prime minister is kind of a divisive person. He's constantly throwing rhetoric at Canadian citizens, trying to find ways to divide us, whether it be by our color, our race, anything, and he's done a way to do that with the vaccine, and people have literally had enough of his rhetoric the last number of years.
We got one of those here in the States as well.
Yes, you do.
Okay, well, let's get into it. The rules. Let's talk about the rules tonight. You can talk to us. We can discuss your case. We can go over what happened, what led up to everything happening. I want to talk about the event and post-event. I think that's most important for the people.
Yep.
But let's talk about the rules. What can you and what can you not talk about?
So Miss Tamara Leach, which was my counterpart in the thing, I'd met Tamara actually, yes, tomorrow, 1 year from tomorrow, I met her for the first time, spoke to her on the phone. She's just a girl that lives about 2.5 hours away from where I live. She was the one that did the website. She did the Facebook, the GoFundMe, the Give, Send, Go, the fundraiser. She was part of it. She was the face. She rode in the passenger seat of the legendary Big Red all the way to Ottawa. Her and I are facing the same charges, 6 indictable offenses for mischief, counseling to commit mischief. They throw in a whole bunch of charges on us. September 5th is our trial day in Ottawa. It's going to be about a 3-week trial. It's a pound of flesh kind of a thing. So we right now are dealing with that. I've got conditions upon release. My conditions are not as bad as what Tamara's are. Tamara's conditions would make Vladimir Putin very proud. Mine, I'm allowed to be on social media. I'm allowed to talk about it, but I'm not allowed to support another convoy or one in any protest. So, and I'm not doing that. There's no convoy. There's not going to be a convoy. We're done with that.
Well, I think the same thing. When your guys, when the convoy in Canada was coming to its conclusion, and they were talking about doing one here, the thing that I said at the time was, well, why? What's it going to prove? Unless you're willing to do something else, this has been done. It's been proven that the forces are going to come down. It's going to end.
Absolutely.
No different than kind of what happened on January 6th. With that being said, what's the biggest regret about making this decision?
I'd have to say I got to be careful how I answer that question. It's been a hell of a last year, I guess.
Well, let's talk about the impact on your family. There's got to be regret there with the impact on your family. How's it been there?
My family's very, very supportive. My parents are probably my wife and my parents, my kids, we're all really tight knit. We're farm people from central Saskatchewan, Canada. Yeah, my parents are right beside me the whole way. My wife is standing right beside me. It's probably most hard for my wife. Her husband was, prominent on social media before this, but just in the province of Saskatchewan, being kind of a loudmouth. And now, I get recognized everywhere I go across the country, and the phone is busy, very, very busy. I kind of got to give her the chance to catch up and work on our marriage a little bit, I guess.
What about friends? Did you lose any friends? I'm sure you gained a ton. I know you've gained one here, but did you lose any during that period?
I don't think so. There's been a few that have distanced themselves from me. And they've done that too when they realize that I'm not standing for the government. You've got your certain population of society that wants to follow government rules, and the other that are going to question it, right? So, none that I've missed. Let's say that.
So let's get into the event. You leave British Columbia. You take off. It's about a 7-day trip. What was that like going across the country? What was the response there?
At any given time, there's like 2,500 vehicles behind us. 25. I think somebody said 25 miles of traffic at some points. People lined the side of the highways, the overpasses, Canadian flags everywhere. There were some towns we had to go through where safety concerns were a must because there was people, like the images of New York City when the troops came home in the 40s.
Right.
One of the cities, Winnipeg, Manitoba, was that. There was tens of thousands of people in the streets, and you had to worry whether somebody got too close to the road. They were standing in the middle of the barricades. It was amazing. I wish I had a GoPro camera that would have recorded it. Many, all the way across.
Were you expecting that kind of outreach, or were you expecting that? No,
nothing. No,
wow.
No.
So you get to Ottawa. You got the response from the public is overwhelming. You get to Ottawa. What was the response there?
It was good. The police led us right to where we parked, I guess is the best way to put it. We were constant communication with law enforcement the entire time. When we had traffic control at most intersections, we had police escorts. Ontario police, the provincial police, the OPP were probably the best to deal with. I can honestly say that. They led us the entire way. They made sure we were safe. We worked together. And then we got to Ottawa and they just kind of dropped us. They shut the line off. They left however many people kind of sitting outside the city. As you learned in the inquiry in Ottawa that went on in November, I was subpoenaed to go out there and testify in part of the inquiry. And we had every government agency blaming every government agency. It was kind of funny to watch the fingers being pointed every direction except for back at themselves. And then it just kind of went from there. We had a prime minister that was an arrogant person and it called names and did things that people in that position shouldn't do. When you're a prime minister, you're leading a country, you should lead by example.
Right.
I don't believe he did.
Do you think the actions that you guys have taken have opened any eyes in Canada?
I believe a lot. It's divided another certain part of the country, apparently, the ones that want government control. And it's opened a lot of eyes. I get a lot of messages on social media on a regular basis in support saying that. I did a post just last week just saying, hey, tell me where you were a year ago and tell me where you are now. And I think last I checked, there was over 1,000 comments on it and they were all positive. Just, I've got letters from people at home that were ready to take their lives. And because of
Yep.
that, they didn't. And
Yep.
so one life saved, I don't care what, that's huge.
When you start a movement like this, and I think it's interesting, people, especially on social media, I get it all the time. A lot of my content is about what's going to happen next, and that it requires your involvement to make sure that it doesn't go any further than what's gone. And people always say the same thing. They always say to me, well, nothing's ever going to happen. Chris, tell me what it takes to make something happen. Can one person make a change?
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. I can't tell you how many phone calls I got from good friends saying, why are you even going to bother with this? Nobody's going to do it. You're not going to change anything. Nothing's going to happen with it. And every single one of those people that said that to me phoned them afterwards and apologized and said, we were wrong. If you want to play that game and you don't think it's going to happen, then sit back and nothing's going to happen. But if you want to make something happen, do it. It's there.
Well, I liken it to people watching a small child drown in a pond, and they all stand along the shore and they go, well, I guess he's going to drown. Nobody's going to do anything, not thinking that there's somebody that they could take action themselves, but they're too unwilling or too scared to do that. So you get into Ottawa. The police have led you to where you're supposed to be, and then they abandon you. What was the next step? Where were you guys? What was your thought process on what the agenda was or what the goal was?
The agenda was to meet with the government. We needed to meet with some sort of leader to work out a strategy for the vast majority of Canadians that weren't falling into these regulations and were tired of the mandates, the nonstop mandates, whether they were provincial mandates or federal mandates. Somebody needed to stop this. We already knew that, you go and get your COVID vaccine passport, or your COVID shot, I guess, and you can still get COVID, give COVID, probably die from COVID. I mean, let's face the facts. The statistics aren't there anymore.
Right. And did you think that when you got there that they would just come out and talk to you and it would be like it is in the movies? Were you that naive, or did you realize, how long did it take you to realize they were going to stonewall you and make you the oppressor?
I guess it kind of led up to that. I think I took part in one of the very first or second news conferences, and then I realized my place wasn't really in front of a news conference microphone or speaking in public. My place was out walking around the trucks and making sure guys were looked after, and so that's where my job kind of gravitated with. If you were there, you would see me on the streets walking and talking to truckers and people, making sure all the needs were met, and there was other people up in that position to look after that. I don't know. We put it out there so many different times that if the government doesn't want to meet with us, then give us a liaison, something where we can bring two sets of people together if that makes people more comfortable. And they were still reluctant to do that. So it was Stonewall. You're right.
Well, did they ever give you anybody to talk to? So there was never a conversation. It was always our way or the highway mentality.
It was the arrogant attitude of the Liberal government of Canada. We had politicians sitting in the House of Commons. We called the House of Commons, where our government, and she basically stood up one day and said, "Hey, the horns that are honking outside are an acronym for Hail Hitler."
Yeah.
Did you hear that one?
I saw that one.
That's disgusting rhetoric. That is just absolutely horrible.
Well, and what we see time and time again is that the people that do this, which is interesting to me, is that I've never seen anyone in history who comes out as the good guy who oppresses others. I've never seen that. I've never seen the bad guy wear a white hat. I've never seen the good guy oppress others. So when you start to look at what Canada's doing, and now what the U.S. is doing, especially what we've learned with the Twitter files, is that a lot of what we've learned over the last 2 years is what we were saying 2 years ago is 100% true. We're vindicated.
Absolutely. 100%.
Now it's just getting through the legal system, in particular in your case. So you get to Ottawa. What was the community there? What was the temperament of the people there? Were they joyous? Were they ready to?
Yeah, they were.
That.
I never seen anybody that was angry. I never did. We bought, I don't know how many snow shovels we bought. We swept sidewalks. We cleaned garbage. The snow was removed. Somebody handed me a huge bag of wool socks at one point, like a big bag. And I walked around the city and I handed up to homeless people. They said that homeless people were actually turning food away because they were so full. There was so many positives there. One thing in Canada, I don't know if the U.S. has it as bad, but we're always been raised east versus west. So right. Eastern Canada, Ontario, and Western, we're just the hillbillies out there. And Quebec is one of the ones that, kind of, they keep everybody separated. But one of the the big points were there was people from Quebec standing on a street corner hugging somebody from Alberta on the western side. And we soon realized that this division has been created over the years by the government. It hasn't been created by the people, because here we are. We're all together, hand in hand. Canadian flag's proud.
Yeah, well, that's what I say that all the time, is that, you see an accident and you run up to the car to help. You don't knock on the window and ask who you voted for or who do you support or look at their bumper stickers on the back end. You break the windows out and you pull them out, and then you ask them.
Exactly. 100%.
You got to have your priorities straight. So let's talk about one of the biggest stories that came out of this deal, especially when you got to Ottawa, was the number of dollars that have been raised from people across the country, from people in the U.S. And as soon as they knew that you had millions of dollars at your disposal and could basically sit there for a year if you wanted to, right?
Yep.
They took action. Talk me through that. What happened there, and how did you find out what was going on?
So the GoFundMe was the first one to expose a whole bunch of trouble there. We found out afterwards the GoFundMe was up around the $10 million rate. We knew that, but then we found out afterwards through the inquiry and different channels that the city police, the city of Ottawa, and the government were working with GoFundMe to have us shut down. They classified us as a terrorist organization, and the funding was terrorist going. They tried everything. We heard the Russian stories. Trump was involved with it. It was just nonstop rhetoric bullshit. Then they got into a little bit of civil litigation there with GoFundMe, trying to release some of the money. They had ended up giving us $1 million. It went into a private bank account between Tamara and myself. We had full access to it for, I think, February 2nd. It was frozen by the government. They had a court order that came in, $1 million in the bank account, about 400,000 in e-transfers, and it was just frozen. So we started the Give, Send, Go through Jacob Wells and his sister, and that went really well. That was up around the $9 million American, I believe.
Yep.
And then the same thing, the government kind of come in and shut it down. But the difference being is Give, Send, Go is in the States, and it's a lot harder to get to for the Canadian government than what it was. And
well, I saw that Heather had to go testify as well.
Yeah, I seen Jay. Yep.
Yeah, for the same exact reason. It's interesting to me is that when I watched that, and it was interesting that all they were trying to do was help. I don't think anybody saw anybody there as criminal except for the government. The government, it was dictating that everybody was a criminal. You're just citizens. Yep. Did you have any interest in overthrowing the government?
No, not at all. That was never an equation.
Right. So what happens next with where you are now? Well, let's go. Before I go there, let's go back because I think that period was really showing. We saw a number of horrific images during that period, especially the last few days of what they called the occupation. Were you afraid at some point that it was going to get worse, that the government was going to have to show force to make you guys move? That was the only option they had left.
I believe that, and that's how it ended. Yeah. So the 17th of February, I was arrested and put in jail. So I missed and I was the first arrested. I was the first brutality. I wasn't brutalized myself. I went and sat in a jail cell for a little while. Tamara was arrested then that later evening, as well as others. And then the trouble started after that. The horses came in and ran a few people over. Right. And the pepper spray. Reporters were shot in the face with tear gas canisters. It was heartbreaking. I was released on bail. I had to leave the city of Ottawa within 24 hours, take my family with me, and I had 3 days to exit the province of Ontario. Now, Canada's a big place, but Ontario is one of our larger provinces, and it's a good drive across there. And it was pretty worrying knowing that we had such a long ways to go. And if I wasn't out of the province within those 3 days, that I would be rearrested and thrown back in jail. But we made it safely sound across the border. I was never so happy to see the province of Manitoba sign, and I'm even more happy to see my home province of Saskatchewan to get back home. That's been a long time.
Well, when you took off on the 23rd, because see, this is what people don't generally understand, is that you can't see the future. But could you have imagined what happened next at any point?
Never in my wildest dreams. I was so scared we'd have, no trucks show up. And then when we got there, the parking lot was full. And then, leaving Medicine Hat, the first city that I pulled out of and led was Medicine Hat, and police escort and police traffic control at every intersection and people lining the highway. And and it was insane. It was absolutely insane.
So the issue at play here has always been, COVID-19, and we're seeing more lockdowns potentially down the road. They're talking about, hey, we've got another new round coming up. Do you believe that the people of Canada or the people of North America, let's call it North America, do you think that it's wise for the governments of these nations to continue to push the people the way that they're pushing them?
I think it's going down a dark hole. I think a lot of people have their eyes open right now, and those, I've always said that if you want to wear a mask, wear a mask. If you want to sleep with a mask on, sleep with a mask. I'm not telling you don't have to wear one. What I'm telling you is that I should have a choice on that fact. If I know that I'm going to make somebody sick, then I'll put the darn mask on. But tell me when you walk into a restaurant that you have to wear your mask to a table, but when you sit down at that table, you can take your mask off and magically the COVID disappears. It's bullshit.
Exactly. Well, and that's what we said from the beginning. If you remember, my content during then was I was showing the science, right? Here's the masks don't work. They do not do what you expect them to do. They're never going to do what you expect them to do. Yep. Even if you put it on an N95 mask, the 95 stands for 95% effective against dust and particles.
Yeah.
Vaccines are not mentioned. So that's how we kind of knew that something was up. Now, I'm going to go down the conspiratorial thing here for a minute, and then we'll jump back in. But it seems more and more like Biden, Trudeau, and a number of other leaders around the globe take their marching orders out of Davos.
Absolutely. Yeah, you see that. They're doing it this year when you're watching the reports coming out of Davos right now.
So does that upset you as a Canadian that your vote really doesn't count because somebody in Davos, Klaus Schwab, or whoever else is directing your government and government officials as to what you're allowed to do?
I guess what upsets me more is that my government, the ones that are responsible for my well-being, has sold my country out to somebody like Klaus Schwab. I'm more angry at that fact right there.
It made a lot of sense when everything started to happen. It was kind of like, where's all this going? What's going to happen? And we were all trying to figure it out. And what I find interesting about that period was we were so blind. And then suddenly I'm in marketing and I started to see marketing tactics being used. And I go, whoa. This isn't right. And the first question I asked was, and this is the first time I got kicked off of social media, was, where's the approval? You cannot advertise these products without approval. And they were, and here in the US at least, they were advertising the product without approval. And I said, well, you can't do this. Well, we're not advertising it. Pfizer never advertised it. BioNTech, none of these guys ever advertised it. It was Budweiser. It was the mayor of New York. Everybody else played as the promotional arm for a drug they couldn't advertise because of U.S. law. So getting in from that, right, back to you guys, your charter is similar, but very different than our Constitution. Kind of explain for, especially our American viewers, the differences and how that helped and how that hurt you guys in Canada.
Well, our charter rights have been violated 100% when it comes to what happened there. I can't get into what the differences between the two charters are between the U.S. or Canada. I'm not well up on that. I know our right to protest was violated. The civil disobedience. There's a certain, you're allowed to have that, and that was all smashed when the police come in, and they geared these officers up. If you look at some of the reports that came out, they geared these officers up. They were like, they riled them up, thinking, we're going to go put some boots and stomp some foreheads in on these people. They're being really bad people, and when they hit the ground, they were ready to fly. And it happened towards the end. I can tell you honestly that I never met a bad officer. Everyone that I met, I dealt well with. I worked with them on a daily basis. They were awesome and good to deal with people. But the people they brought in at the end were different. There's always the conspiracy stories, right? Remember, right. The UN planes were parked within 3 hours away, and then all of a sudden some officers showed up that didn't speak very good English, and they were missing their badge numbers and their credentials off their uniforms. So tell us about that. I don't know. That's never came out. There's been conspiracy theories about that from day one, but it's a sad state.
Well, did you think at any point, on your drive out there, that when you got there, that again, you were going to be the enemy?
No, absolutely not. Judging by what was going on the way there, that was the bad thing. And it's pretty disheartening when you're called the names. What did Trudeau call us? The small fringe minority and a bunch of Canadians with unacceptable views. I mean, he called us names the entire and used the media against us. So,
well, when he spoke French, he really tore into you guys.
Yeah.
In English, he'd do it one way, but in French, man, he really tore into you guys because a lot of the Americans weren't understanding a lot was going on. And then we get the translation, go, whoa, where'd that come from?
And then you get to the inquiry where he was under oath and honestly said that he didn't call anybody any names. So I don't know what happens when you lie under oath, but if I did it,
well, bad story. I think the rules are different for them, right? That's what we've learned over the last 3 years, that the rules are different. Which brings me to this question here. We've got a situation now to where, at least here in the U.S., and I don't know how bad it is in Canada, but 2 years previous, we had Antifa and Black Lives Matter in the streets like crazy. And you'd see the police out there. I think, this is just my personal opinion, but I think a lot of these police thought that it was going to be the same kind of deal, both at January 6th and with the convoy. And I'm not trying to conflate those issues. I'm just saying that they're similar type situations for protest, true protest, right? Where you guys didn't have any buildings burned down. There was no rioting. There was no looting. There was no homicide. There wasn't any of the issue that we saw in the previous 2 years with Black Lives Matter and Antifa. Okay, so we know that the rules are different because we have one bad day. You guys have 3 weeks that you say, okay, we're done. And I think the difference is here, and see if you believe this is the fact as well, that Antifa and Black Lives Matter are made up basically of kids. January 6th, and the convoy was made up of grown adults.
Yeah.
That the graybeards is what I call them, that aren't going to put up with bullshit. Do you think that's what scared him most? That it wasn't just a bunch of kids anymore? It was able-bodied men?
You're going after your blue-collar workers. We had to deal with Antifa on a daily basis in Ottawa. There was we had watch groups set up within the trucks, and it's funny that those people were never arrested, but vandalism to trucks and the black hoodies, you name it, they were there in full force, and we had to pretty much patrol ourselves and have watch groups because they didn't seem like there was anybody worried about what their activities were.
What do you see next for Canada? What do you see based on what's currently going on? If nothing changes, if Trudeau is not replaced through the elections, because my understanding is he's got another 2 to 3 years before he has to hold elections.
Yeah, it's at least another year, 2.5 years, I would imagine. Yeah, 2025, I believe. So he's got them. He's introducing the gun bill, right? So now they've taken our handguns away from us. They're taking our semi-automatic rifles away from us already, and this is already happening. So if you own a pistol or an AR style rifle, magazines now are illegal. You're not allowed to transfer those. You're not allowed to sell those. Prince Edward Island, I believe the local law enforcement have started going door to door, rounding up people's guns. I heard that. I've heard that rumor a few times already. It's coming to the rest of Canada. It's just a matter of time. Bolt action rifles are about the only thing that is safe at this time right now. Your 12 gauge semi-automatic shotgun.
Gone.
Yeah, if you have one, you're now a criminal.
Well, again,
a Ruger 1022.
Before we got into this, I was talking to Chris about the story coming out of LA where the sheriff in LA is now calling pistols, semi-automatic pistols, assault pistols. They try to demonize everything. And the reason is, and this is my view, is that an armed society is so much easier to push down and oppress. And we haven't seen anything coming out of these guys, Canada or otherwise, that leads us to believe that that's not what it is, that it's something else, that they're actually doing this in our own best interest. Let's touch on that for a bit. The convoy wraps up. You're all headed home. What happened next? When were you alerted as to what happens next and all the charges coming down? Or was that all done when you were arrested? Or did they just keep piling it on?
It was, I believe I started off with 4 charges. It was a few weeks later. I was out trucking. Actually, I was in the state of Washington, and I got a phone call from the lawyers saying, you're about to be charged with a couple more counts. So I was nervous. I thought, well, do I just stay in Washington?
Yeah, don't go home.
No, come on now, work with me. You're a little nervous, and I wasn't being rearrested. It was just charges. So Tamara was charged with the same thing. This is going to be the year of the trials, unfortunately. There's a ton of trials. There's about 50 or 60 different trials with different truckers that were arrested that they're slowly going through the process. I believe that Tamara and I will be the last of the trials, judging by the date. We're getting close to, Canada has a 2-year limit on what they can do for trial. I do have a charter challenge coming up in February 16th, 17th, I believe. When I was arrested, they took my cell phone and they got a warrant. They broke into the cell phone. And most of the time they just take the information that they want off that cell phone. But in this case, they pretty much opened it like a book and released it to the courts, and the courts released it to the media. And my personal life was right on full display. Conversations with my ex-wife, my children, my wife, my family, business customers, emails from business customers, like not the stuff that.
Well, why do you think they did that? What was the purpose of doing that?
Embarrassment. But they violated a charter right when they did that too. And in those conversations were lawyer conversations on text message with my 2 active lawyers, Keith Wilson and Eva Chipia, which are still here to this day. They're still with us. They're still walking with us. They're amazing people. Tamara and I have regular contact through these people, which is, God sense. They were put in our path, and they're still here for that awesome reason. So the charter challenge is 16th, 17th, where, there's some civil rights that were violated within my charter rights. So we're going to see what happens with the courts there. I think it's the 16th, 17th is when the trial's set for that.
What are you expecting? What are your lawyers expecting? Are they? I mean, it's clear cut what they did.
Well, yeah, I looked at the evidence and the disclosure. It's right there. They're, you're not allowed as a Crown prosecutor to look at your text messages between your lawyer and yourself. That's one of the biggest ones right there, I believe. Is it not?
Yeah, well, they did the same thing with Trump. Here again, what we're seeing internationally are the rules are being broken. We've got a constitution. I've been saying it, and your charter is no different. Your charter, regardless of what it says, is no different than our constitution. It only has the strength that we, the people, give it. Right. And people get really antsy when you start saying that. Well, what does that mean? Well, what that means is that, and I know in the Constitution, don't know about the charter, but in the Constitution, we have the authority to remove our government.
Yep.
There's a process. We can do it. We don't need their permission. They serve at our pleasure. We the people are the ones who, make everything happen in this country. I don't know why the elites think that they have some authority or otherwise. And what it comes down to me, and again, I say this time and time again in my podcast, life, Chris, has not changed since 7th or 8th grade. It hasn't changed at all. The people are the same. The bullies, they didn't stop being bullies.
No.
Right? And then you've got the 2 people that I've through my career, I've realized are the most dangerous people are bullies who never grew out of it, didn't realize what they were doing, and nerds or geeks who were always bullied and so on, who finally get into a position of power. Those 2 people are the most dangerous people. And we're seeing a lot of it. So I can't remember her name. Who was a lady who was the spokesperson during the convoy?
That would be Tamara Leach.
No, not for your side, for the government. She was the one, we'll shut you down. We've got your bank account.
Christina Freeland.
Let's get into her for a bit because she's had, if you can talk about it, she comes across as about as tyrannical as the recent PM of New Zealand. Absolutely, same kind of deal for taking people's rights. And so let's talk about that. Was that something that fueled what you guys were doing, or did you laugh about it?
Well, I think we essentially laughed a bit about it. Watching them call the Emergencies Act into place. We were in a hotel room watching this live stream of Justin Trudeau, and you could see little Freeland standing beside him. It was like a bauble doll. I'm not sure somebody didn't make a bauble doll ever. She had a mask on. You could see her hyperventilating. She was disturbed. She was very upset. I don't know if she was nervous or she knew what they were about to do to Canadians in the country of a free country. She's very divisive. She's and her rhetoric is not a lot different than Prime Minister Trudeau's. Really, it's all about divide and conquer.
Do you see with her staying in power, with Trudeau staying in power, with the current MP staying in power, do you see anything changing at all with them? Do you think that they'll see the light one day?
No, okay, I don't think they will.
I can't remember the gentleman's name. He's the new leader.
Pierre Poilievre.
Yes. Talk about what he's been saying and what kind of, have you been in conversation with his team or anybody in the party for help or assistance?
Well, a few parties have reached out and had conversation with me about joining forces, but we really tried to keep it nonpartisan. We didn't really want the politicians involved in it because of the reason why we're here in the first place, right? I'm a conservative. I support the Conservative Party of Canada. I like Pierre Poilievre. I think he's got a voice on him, and he is argumentative, and he's quick-witted on the floor.
He's very
really he's really good. I've enjoyed his politics for quite some time, and I think he'll do a really good job. I'd like to see him go a little farther and stand behind the country instead of some of the policies that have been in place. But he is our best hope to get away from the current administration. It's coming. There's rumors of Trudeau calling an election in the spring. Apparently, I don't see that. I see
spring in 23 or 24.
23 is the rumor. He would call a snap election in the spring. That is a rumor right now. I can't see Trudeau even being that silly because enough people in this country. I think his polling must be down around that 16-17% right now amongst Canadians. So he's going to have to need a lot of help in order to get back into power. If that,
well, not necessarily. I mean, you watch the 2020 elections in the States, right? And you watch the 22 elections in Nevada and Arizona. So the poll numbers don't matter anymore. It's just who shows up, the week before, the month before election, or 7 days after. It really doesn't matter anymore.
It's the mail-in ballots, right?
Yeah. We'll just count them. That's what I do. When I have a big sum of cash that I want to send from one part of the country to the other part, I'm totally trusting in the Postal Service to get it there safely. So what happens?
We don't have the Dominion. We don't have the Dominion voting system in Canada. I don't believe so.
Well, no, you have the other ones. They're all offshoots. So there's only 3 or 4 in the whole country or the whole world that do it. And they're all owned by the same group of people. So, it only goes to figure. So what's next? Talk about, let's go through between now and the trial and then post-trial. Do you have an appeal process? If there is an appeal process, can you stay out or do you have to serve time while you're going through the appeal? Walk us through that.
Usually mischief and the charges we're charged with are usually a summary offense. It usually carries, probation, something like that. Whereas when they change it to an indictable offense, that means, more harsher sentences. So we've got good lawyers. We've got legal counsel. We've got a really strong case. They've got a lot of, it's going to be an interesting story for the next little while. It depends on the charter challenges coming up next month. Tamara and I,
will those charter challenges, will they change any of the charges for you or will anything get dropped, or is it just you're challenging what they've done with your private information?
Yes. So there's a possibility of the charges being thrown out if it's found to be guilty. There's a really good chance of that, and then set up the case for later on with civil litigation and that. So we'll see. Tamara and I are in constant communication via lawyers. That we're not allowed to have contact. So we have to have legal counsel present whenever we're around. We have an organization called Freedom Corp, which is the entity that has the money that's in escrow. So in the escrow right now is approximately $5 million that's still left, which includes the $1.4 million that was in Tamara's bank account. There's a Canadian company called Stripe that is the payment processing company that takes the money out of your bank account and puts it into Give Send Goes. There was approximately $3 million trapped in that company when the freezes came out. So that money didn't get put back to the people. So right now, Tamara and I, as well as other board members and anybody that was recognized on the streets of Ottawa, have a $400 million civil lawsuit against us right now for damages against the city of Ottawa. That, I believe tomorrow, there's a court case about that. We have a lawyer going up against it in regards to us. I wish them all the luck. Hopefully that's good. And then once that is dealt with, the Ontario Attorney General's office has a $4 million lawsuit against Miss Litch and myself personally. It's all about the money.
Oh, that's it. That's it.
Yep.
Well, that's what I've said. Again, my content is about basically 2 things. Your rights, right? Your right. And trying to get people to have enough courage to stand up and defend them. Because the Constitution, the Charter, it's a piece of paper. It means nothing unless people are willing to do the things that it takes to defend those. And so I think that what people have to start realizing is that the power behind what we do is our voice. And if you don't raise your voice, again, 7th, 8th grade, those tactics come into play, because if the bully can make you do something and you don't stand up against the bully, well, the bully's going to keep doing what they're going to do. And
Absolutely,
what's amazing to me is, and what you've probably seen a lot of this as well, is that the people that surround the bully, the people that give the bully his power or perceived power, right? They feel the freedom to start really speaking freely. Are you seeing a lot of that in Canada, where people that you thought were just nonchalant, easy come, easy go people are all of a sudden the most vitriolic, evil people you've ever heard of? Have you run into that?
Yeah, I see that on a regular basis. I see that. There's some people within the organization that were standing on the ground with us that have kind of did a turncoat on us and now are 100% against us. And I believe it's just, that people have lost the reason why we were there in the first place, I would imagine. There's a few other things. Did you know that we have a certain gentleman in Canada, Jeremy McKenzie? He's a war veteran. He's an army veteran in this country. He's called the Raging Dissident. He was the man behind the fake Diagolon. Do you remember hearing that story?
No.
The meme country. Yeah. So that was one of the reasons why the federal government invoked the Emergencies Act, because of this. Jeremy McKenzie drew a line on the map of the North America from Vancouver, from BC down through Texas, and it was a white stripe. So he called it Diagolon. And the leader of Diagolon is a fictitious goat figure that has a opioid addiction. Like, it's so far-fetched, it's not funny, but the Canadian government, they latched onto the story as it was full of extremists. And these were the people that were in Ottawa, and they were going to try and overthrow the government. We heard about this in the Inquiry. It was nonstop. So Jeremy's got a podcast, and he's very vocal on social media. He's been since canceled by a Canadian banking system. They have revoked his bank accounts and all of his loans because he is not for the establishment.
Yep.
Tamara Leach has lost her PayPal account because she's not for the establishment. I was selling big red hoodies. My truck has an artist did a cartoon version of my Semi, a beautiful. And all it had was freedom in a cartoon version on a hoodie. We were selling those. And Square has canceled my account for security reasons. Like, we keep digging up more of this stuff and bringing more of this corruption to light. And I think that's the thing that's the most surprising thing. It's still going on 12 months later.
Well, that's what we see, though, is that, and again, it's all intertwined. When you take back what Trudeau's doing, when you take a look at what Biden is doing, when you take a look at what the Democratic Party is doing, when you take a look at what the Liberal Party is doing in Canada, they're following a narrative that, and again, I hate to say this because it sounds so, put your tinfoil hat on. It's coming out of Davos. They're not listening to we the people anymore. They couldn't give two shits about what we do or what we want or what we have to say. Their marching orders are coming out of Davos.
And they're not even hiding it. They're not hiding it. It's
at all. Well, again, I don't have it down here. I've been reading Klaus Schwab's Great Reset again. I wanted to go back and familiarize myself with what he claimed in 2020. And it's amazing that in the introduction of the book, and I'd forgotten this, in the introduction of the book, he basically says, states, capital S, have been doing this since the 1300s. They've been using biological warfare to shut people down and using it as an excuse to take power, take authority. And the more that we see that, and this is me, I'm gonna rant here for a moment, but the more that we see, and you touched on it earlier, the catalyst for all of this was a flu that came out of China.
Ooh, yep.
We know that for sure now, right? That's where it came from. No answer for buts. The flu was a flu. If you were sick already, there's a good chance you could die.
Yep.
It was bad flu, but not as bad as SARS. Oh, Kramer, you don't know what you're talking about. Yep. New article just came out today stating that hospitals deliberately hid the true cause of death and said COVID to drive up the COVID pandemic. New article came out today. We're finding that the Fauci files are going to drop all of this information and tell us exactly what happened, that everything was about control. So what we look at, and we've started to really dive into, is that this globalism thing isn't just our governments, it's our corporations as well. So you've got Stripe, you've got GoFundMe, Square. Yep. They all jumped in. Why? Because they're all controlled through ESG by BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard, or other large companies. And Canada has their own group. So in our country, it's those three organizations. They own the controlling factor in all of these companies and all of these entities. So when they say, hey, we don't want that dude talking this way, they try to attack you the best way they can. Now, again, what do you think? And I don't know if you saw the video that I did about a year ago, but I said they should have waited a generation. They should have waited until my youngest son was my age. By that time, all the graybeards are gone, all the boomers are gone, all the Gen Xers, all of those of us that were raised with civics, understand our rights, and have the balls to stand up for them are going to be gone. They jumped the gun. They wanted to do it one generation too early. Would you agree with that? That it's going to be the graybeards and it's going to be those of us who understand our rights and know that it's better to give everything for your rights than to take a knee again?
100%. I agree with you. The only difference is that I've raised my son, my 19-year-old son, along the same lines as myself. So
yeah.
He fought the COVID vaccine from day one. He said, I've got a healthy immune system, Dad. There's no need for me to take this. On our way to Ottawa, I had the COVID. I had Omicron virus, and I spent a week with him inside a truck cab. This 19-year-old kid that never had a vaccine in him. I had, and he never got COVID.
Yep.
Never.
Yep.
Still hasn't. 2-3 years later, he's still COVID free.
Yeah, I didn't get the vaccine. My wife didn't get it. My kids didn't get it. And they're same here. My boys get it. They are they're much more aligned with our thinking than their peers currently. My son went to IU and it was terrible. He hated it because during that period he was still in school when all this was going on, and luckily got out right as the mandates went in. That's when right as the mandates went in to go back to school. He just graduated then. So what do you see for the future? Do you see and this is just anecdotal, but you talk to your friends, you talk to the people in your community. And I know that everybody wants to come up to you and talk to you and say, hey, listen, we appreciate what you did. But do you think it's growing, or do you think it's just a thank you and then they're going to move on and go about their lives? Do you think that, and I don't want you're not going to promote anything here, but what's the likelihood of Canadians saying, listen, we're done with this?
I think that Canadians are going to move on to the next thing. I think that the trucks were the catalyst. I think now it is more of a freedom movement that's going to move forward. I think a lot of people are excited for the time when Tamara and I can speak openly and freely again, and we will someday. They're waiting, and I hear from a lot of people on a regular basis. We're getting back to that point where they're getting tired of it. Their eyes are open, and every day something happens. Jeremy McKenzie's bank accounts are shut down. That's going to piss a certain part of the population off. The hoodie sales, like a cartoon version. It opens more people's eyes, and I think it just continues that. Tamara and I are still involved with Freedom Corp quite heavily. Even though we have conditions against each other, we have to do everything through the lawyers. We're taking part in. We were at an event last week in Calgary, her and I, the lawyers, and the rest of the Freedom Corp board. We had our board meetings and talked about the future. And moving forward, we're foundation is there. If we have access to the funds again after the lawsuits and everything, we intend on using those to help people in legal battles going forward that are being prosecuted for the wrong reasons. Right now, the government can take you and charge you for whatever the hell they want, and you'll pretty much go broke trying to fight yourself, and they've got endless funds. So why is that? We need to maybe change the way that's done.
Well, I think that the government comes in and takes, I think that they should pay for everything until they prove that you're guilty.
100%.
Right? And not public defenders, but the best of the best. I think that you should be able to have Johnny Cochran or whoever. The reason I'm saying that, Johnny Cochran, I know he's dead. But we were watching, my wife and I were watching the O.J. Simpson thing this afternoon. His name popped up. So let me ask you this. What is something that people can do today, both Americans and Canadians, to help with your cause?
I guess it's keeping their eyes open is the big thing, and not letting things pass. Like there's so many people that are hitting the trials right now, and people need to keep their eyes open. At any given time, anyone could be arrested and thrown back in jail. And a lot of people remain sleeping. Keep opening your eyes and keep watching what's going on around you, and eventually we'll get to everybody. I've seen so many people wake up. Mind-blowing to see the people and the stories that I've heard. And we just need to continue that. You can't let your guard down, because these guys are still walking all around. They're walking around us and amongst us.
Is there a website or someplace that people can go find out more about the trial, what your status is, or keep up to date with you guys besides social media?
Well, that's just it. We've got a Freedom Corp Facebook page. That's about it right now. We're working on a website. We actually just in our discussions last week with our first annual board meeting, I guess we talked about a website and fundraising path forward, getting our names back out there, introducing everybody to the people on the board. There's I think 6 or 7 members in there, as well as the lawyers that have been there right from day one. So we're out doing events. I'll be in Lloydminster, Alberta here on the February 9th for Theo Fleury, our Olympic gold stars medalist, Theo Fleury, Jamie Soleil, and Canadians for Truth, along with Joseph Burgo. He was an adamant part of Ottawa. He was there with us the whole time, started this organization, and we're all kind of helping them grow with us now. It's the news. They're getting out the news, and they're doing a lot of stories on vaccine injuries, on different things that are going on, and just stuff that people need to keep their eye on.
And what about you? Speaking of vaccine injury, you said you've taken the vaccine. Have you noticed any side effects or any issues or anything you're concerned about?
Nothing that I've had myocarditis about 15 years ago, so maybe I got the saline shot. Who knows? My father got the second dose and his gallbladder quit working, and before that he was pushing it pretty hard. Chris, you need to get your vaccine and be safe. And after that, watching he was 68 years old in the time, and I watched him age really, really fast in a matter of 6 months to the point where he shuffles when he walks now.
Yeah. Well, my dad got his, and 3 weeks later was dead.
Yeah,
got his booster, and I warned him, but I'm just a kid.
Yeah.
He's trying to do the best thing possible. Where can I'm sorry. What I meant to say is there was a ton of people throughout the last year that has given you a lot of help. Is there anybody you'd like to take the opportunity to thank at this point?
Oh, my lawyers, my family, my lawyers, Keith Wilson, Eva Chipiak, those two, the JCCF, the Justice Center for Consular Freedoms, they got a hold of us early in there when they realized there was a lot of money and that we needed some help. And we chartered a plane and we flew a bunch of lawyers out. They flew a bunch of lawyers out to Ottawa and helped us. They flew, I think there was 5 lawyers when they touched down. The 2 that remained were Eva Chipiak and Keith Wilson, and they're still with us today. I mean, I can't shout out to those guys enough for what they've done. I can consider them personal friends now. We share alcohol at a party, or it's the good stuff. These are the good people that we've met over the last while. My family has been right behind me 100%. My wife. That's the saving grace right there, man. As long as you got friends around you, it doesn't matter what happens.
I agree with you, man. I agree with you. Again, we've been talking to Chris Barber. Chris is known as Big Red in Canada. Very instrumental in the convoy, and now paying the price for demanding freedom. Chris, is there anything you want to say in closing?
Keep your stick on the ice, I guess. That's my saying on TikTok all the time. Seems to piss the liberals off just a little bit. Hey, you stole that from Don Cherry. No, I didn't.
Well, there you go. I got to wrap it up for us. Unless you've got anything else to say, that pretty much does it for me.
Should be good. No, it's been a pleasure being on with you there, Kramer. It's good to finally see you face to face on the screen here.
You as well, man. I watched what you did, and I told my wife tonight, I said, Kim sent me a message saying that you were excited to do this. And I said, you're excited. I'm excited. I'm a talker. You're a doer. You actually did what we talk about. And so I live in your shadow, man. I really do. With that being said,
well,
go ahead.
There's one. They're like, Kim is the one that needs a shout out. Kim is the one that's been instrumental behind the Big Red Hoodie. She's made the website. She's done all the marketing. She's done this woman. She's amazing. You know her. I know her well.
Great lady.
She's a huge, and she's listening right now. So she's probably blushing a little bit, which she deserves it. So,
well, you got to give everybody a pat on the back and say thanks for those, because without them, you can't do it.
100%. No.
There we go.
100%.
Everybody, this is CramerSez podcast. My name is Kramer. We will be back tomorrow or as soon as we can.
Get more at CramerSez.com. CramerSez.com.